Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. Today I'm going to be doing another discussion video, and I am drinking some hot chocolate with 2 gigantic marshmallows in it. And the discussion that we're going to be doing today is working a full-time job and trying to write on top of it. Which I feel like at least the people I talk to can probably relate to in some degree. And for the people who can't relate, maybe it's more of a discussion on how they can help others, writers, or encourage them with writing with a full-time job. So without further ado, let's just get into this discussion. So sit back, grab your favorite drink, relax, and let's discuss. 2 notes before we actually begin. 1, this is really hot to hold, so I'm probably not going to hold it as much in my video today. 2, I have new hair. Same person, new hair. If you were on my Instagram, then you already know that I dyed my hair last week, but just in case you're not, or you're unfamiliar, or you didn't catch my live stream last week as well, I did a thing, and I really like the thing, but it's different. It's a lot different, so we're just rolling with it. So writing with a full-time job is really hard, and I'm sure if you've ever been in that position, you understand what I'm going to talk about today. Even if you haven't been in a full-time job, or had the luxury for whatever reason to not have a full-time job, have a part-time job, not have a job at all, how do you navigate this and finding time and finding a schedule when you have to commit to something else more often? If you're already committing such a large portion of your day to something else, how do you get the motivation and the willpower and the routine to keep writing? It's tricky. And to be honest, the reason I'm doing this as a discussion video, this is not a how-to, is because I'm not perfect at it. What I will say is that having a writing routine or a schedule when you're not a full-time writer is very, very hard, and it's tricky to do. I am not always good at it. And what I've kind of come to the conclusion, and this could be true for you, it doesn't necessarily have to be, but it's definitely true for me, is that with a full-time job, if I am going to be writing, something else is going to suffer a little bit. And that's really how it is. Now, I try to limit what suffers to being not as detrimental to myself. That would mean, I'm not trying to suffer from no sleep. I don't, because I still have a full-time job, so I need to be somewhat active and conscious to do a very hard job, in my opinion, because I'm dealing with therapy and I'm dealing sometimes with people's lives. So I can't sacrifice my sleep to write, which some people can and they can function. For me, I'm not that kind of person. I need my sleep. I need a good 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, and it sucks sometimes. I wish I didn't have to be that way, but that's the fact. I also don't want to sacrifice any kind of food or health-related matters. Again, that's my livelihood and my well-being. I don't want to try to kill myself over, like, literally or figuratively over writing when I'm not getting anywhere at this point in time. Like, I'm not writing to a deadline, and we'll get back to that later. What I really mean about sacrificing is I'll sometimes, if I'm really trying to dedicate something with my writing, I'm more likely sacrificing time with my loved ones, which is friends, family, even to some extent my husband. Occasionally, I might sacrifice a little bit of my fitness, but again, that goes back to well-being, and I try not to, because I recognize sitting for long periods of time, and just for my own mental health, exercise really helps that. So it's all kind of tied up in that. But occasionally, I will choose writing over exercising some days of the week, because I'm not going to be able to do it otherwise. Or I also sacrifice some other hobbies that I might have. Video games is a huge one. When NaNoWriMo comes around, I'm almost never playing video games anymore, which isn't a bad thing. It's just kind of taking one hobby and swapping it for another. But other hobbies might also suffer too. I may not be as active with art, and I'm not a big artist, I'm not a good artist, but I do like to make things and craft things. But sometimes when I'm writing more, that goes by the wayside. My creativity for videos might also go by the wayside. When I'm really invested in writing, sometimes to the point where I'm getting burnt out with other things, I don't do videos as much, or I don't feel like I'm doing good quality content videos, what I should say. And that could be, it might not come off that way, but that's how I feel. And really, reading time for me. I absolutely love reading, and that's one of those things that does relax me and I enjoy it. But when I'm writing heavily, Camp July this year in 2020 is a huge example of this. I barely read and I was just so invested in my own writing, which was giving me a whole other life, but I was sacrificing that. So the first part of this that I'm going to actually say when you're trying to figure out how to write with a full-time job is you may have to sacrifice something else, and you have to determine what's going to be worth sacrificing, what you can actually sacrifice, and if you're going to be okay with it. I'm not going to encourage you to like sacrifice time away from your kids, because if you have kids, that's important. Don't sacrifice your health, your well-being, your food, your sleep. Those are things that you're going to continue to need to function, especially if you're essentially doing 2 jobs, and one of those jobs, i.e. writing, is for free. You need to be at full capacity at all times. But all those little things, whether it's time with extra time with friends, maybe you see a friend once a week, maybe you have to go once every other week. Maybe, instead of watching TV that night, you decide to write instead. It's all about that balance. And again, you have to determine if you're willing to sacrifice it. I can't be that judge, and no one else really can. It's just up to you guys, what you feel you're comfortable doing. For me, video games and writing, and honestly, time with my friends, family, and my husband usually are the first ones to go when I'm trying to figure out how to write more with my full-time job. So that brings me right into my next point is time management. Time management is incredibly crucial when you're writing with a full-time job. And time management in general, without having an extra intensive hobby on top of it, is hard for a lot of people. I'm also not the greatest at this. I've gotten better, but I'm sure my husband would tell you that that's a lie, and I'm not, but I am. It just takes a lot of practice and a lot of configuring. The first thing that I'm going to say on this note of time management is when you have a full-time job, can you actually treat writing like a job? Now think about it. Some people, this might be true. You might, because there's definitely people I know out there with children, with other responsibilities, who somehow manage to have a full-time job and a part-time job. I actually know literally one person in real life who has 2 full-time jobs, and that baffles me, and they have a child, and my brains are like scattered on the floor thinking about it because I don't understand how that's even possible. But it's true. So if you are treating writing like a job and you are balancing it, then you have to understand that if that's your goal and your mindset, you are giving a lot of attention to it. And if you're treating it like a job, then you are going to have certain expectations of yourself and of others, I'm sure. If you're just writing with the intention of something, and what I would say is like writing with intention in general, but the intention of I'm going to self-publish, I'm going to query, I'm going to do this. It's a little bit different because you're putting, you might have some deadlines to yourself, but they're soft deadlines. They don't really mean anything except to you. You're not waiting on an agent to get back to you and tell you have to kick things into gear. You're not waiting for a publishing house to pick things up. You're not waiting because you're not taking that step yet. In some degrees, maybe you are, but if that's the case, then some of this, like maybe you've already figured out your time management if you're already to that point. For me, it's taken a really long road to even get to the querying stage because my time management was crap. Absolute trash. And I could not balance doing 2 jobs, college, and everything else. At that time in my life when I was working a lot on my co-written book, it was a low priority for me. Even though I wanted it to be a high priority, I didn't know how to make it a high priority, and it wasn't. That's the truth. It just wasn't a high priority to me. Now, writing has moved up into my priorities list, and I have to try to make the time for it. So with that being said, when I give myself deadlines, I understand that they're self-imposed, and I really don't beat myself up when I have deadlines and I don't meet them. Mostly because I am only one person. Sometimes with co-written work, you're 2 people or more, but you're still one person. And you can't do everything all the time. It's not going to happen. But if you're writing with the intention of somehow getting published, whether that's self-published or indie press or traditional press, you do have to try to figure out where it's going to be. And this is why I bring it up with the what are you going to sacrifice? Because if your intention is to get published, you are going to need to sacrifice something at least once a week, because writing and editing and going through the whole process is still going to take some time commitment. And you need it. Otherwise, you're not getting anywhere. That's the truth. So time management is extremely hard. And I think this goes along with the organization piece, which is my next point in this video. In order to successfully manage your time, you need to be organized. And again, sometimes it's hard for people. I think I do really well with organization. It doesn't mean I follow it, but I will get the time and everything mapped out to the best degree possible. First, with organization, we're going to talk about scheduling, because this is literally probably the best tip that anyone will ever give you. Now, I don't necessarily mean a full-on writing routine, and I'll touch upon that next, but really what I just mean is if you are setting out to write, then you need to schedule the time for it. And that could take some maneuvering, in my opinion. That might be just being upfront with your partner and saying, hey, I really, want to spend time with you, whatever, but I really want to get this done. And how can we make this work? Whether it's, if you don't live with your partner, that could be, hey, I know we usually hang out on the weekends, but at least this chunk of time I need to write or do something. And that might be you guys are going to be together. Maybe your partner comes later. Maybe you go over there later, etc. But you're carving out that time that you have. Because for the most part, with people who have full-time jobs, traditionally you're going to have weekends off. So you're going to end up moving things around and rearranging things to sacrifice a little bit of time to write, if you're not able to do so during the week. If you live with other people, the same kind of conversation might be had. Hey, this is my time that I'm going to be writing. I would appreciate it if you can give me some space, if you can try to have less interruptions. I'm going to be doing XYZ for this amount of time. It's all about being clear and upfront with people who are going to be around you and interacting with you. Same thing for other people, your friends, your parents, your other relatives. Unless they're kind of jerks, most people understand, like, I'm just busy. You don't even have to tell them if you're writing, but hey, I'm busy from this time. Don't bother me. Simple as that. It's not really offensive by any means, because you're just doing something else at that moment. And sometimes it's the hardest, because I know for me as a person, especially with my partner, it's so hard because I feel guilty when I'm carving out time for writing, especially when I'm working all week. And now I have an untraditional job. I work Monday through Fridays, but my hours vary and I make my own schedule. So it's hard because some nights I might not get home till 7 o'clock at night. And by that point, it's like, oh, I haven't seen you all day and you've already been home for 2+ hours. So it's weird. And it kind of, there is a guilty piece of it. However, I do live with my partner. So I'm like, hey, I go to bed with you every night. I wake up with you. Like, we can carve a little bit of time out. How do we make this work? And it's just being, again, transparent. I actually send my partner my weekly schedule every week, and I include my live streams in it. I include writing time. I include who I'm going to be talking to, when, where, because otherwise I might be giving the wrong impression of, hey, I'm free this time and I'm really not. And that's happened a few times in the past where I didn't actually make it clear that I was doing something writing related. And my partner's gotten sad just because they were going to plan this entire other routine for us. And I kind of ruined that essentially. But transparency goes great with scheduling. And on that, blocking out that time again is so important to being able to get anything done. Now, this whole routine segment too, I do think it's important to have a routine because, as everyone kind of says in the writing world or any real job world, if you have a routine, you get into habits, and the more likely, you do it, the more likely it's going to be a habit, essentially. That was kind of a weird word, I'm sorry. But what I really mean is that the more often you do something, the more likely it is that you're going to pick it up. So whether that means your routine is, I just have to carve out one night a week to write, Or I'm gonna give myself a half hour to an hour to write every day, or I'm only gonna write on the weekends. For me, it's not so much that you have to do something exactly the same way every single day. It's just giving that commitment whatever you can do. Because again, remember, if we have a full-time work job and you're either writing because you are going to be published or you're writing to eventually be published, you still have to give time to that. And there's a ton of writers out there. Like, I know Alexa Dunn on authortube. She has a full-time job on top of writing, and she still is putting out books. So there's definitely ways to do it. You just have to first start and get a commitment. And whatever that means, it's going to be different for everyone. For me, I actually find that the weekends, even though I'm able to spend more time with my partner on the weekends because I'm not working crazy hours during the week, my partner sleeps in on the weekends. So waking up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning to come write on the weekends is literally perfect. Even though it's not everyone's cup of tea, that's how it is for me. I can literally get up and bang out a couple, whatever I'm doing, whether it's chapters or editing or writing. I have that time in the morning because by the time they're waking up, I honestly say my husband's like 10 o'clock usually is a pretty solid time. So if I wake up at 6 o'clock even and do my own thing for maybe like get ready, I can still get like 3 hours of writing in before he's even up. Conversely, you might be someone who is a night owl and your partner goes to bed early. That's a perfect time to write at that time. So just make it work for you. But again, you need to be a little bit organized and being clear with everyone and somehow schedule in the time. So this brings me to my last segment, because all of these little things that I'm thinking of as far as the time management and the organization and what you're going to sacrifice when is all fine and dandy. But as I was talking to some friends about this topic in general, the one thing that did stick out to me and someone suggested I talk about it is the mental fatigue. When you have a full-time job, it is true that sometimes you just aren't going to have the ambition to sit down and write or sit down and do another job. It can be super easy to burn out. And that is no exception for me, because I have been in plenty of situations where I get home and I'm melting into a puddle because my brain is fried, my body is tired, and I just can't even function, even sometimes enough to eat dinner. So I kind of would think there's two paths to kind of getting over the mental fatigue. The one is to push through. You know, if you, again, this kind of goes back to scheduling as well. So not to be crazy, but pushing through enough to say, hey, I scheduled this time, let me just sit down. And sometimes, also balance the fact that you might not necessarily have to write in that time. Because trust me, I don't do well sometimes trying to force myself to write, especially if I'm tired. But I might do other things that balance out that I'm not actually writing, but I can do this instead. I have a video, and I will link it in the card above, wherever it is, about how to be productive when you're not writing. I did this a while ago on my channel, but I'm still strongly stand behind it. And that's a good video to do in those nights that you're just kind of mentally burned out. In that video, I'll just kind of highlight here, but doing some writing podcasts might be inspiring. Again, you're not really working on your own work, but you're doing something that's going to eventually be productive for your writing career. Think of it as like training for your job, right? I don't know about you guys. I have to do trainings all the time in the field I'm in because I'm a therapist and we're learning things and we're always constantly growing. So because of that, I'm always learning new things and trying to absorb information. And sometimes it's mandated to go to trainings. Think of writing podcasts or writing related videos, content, YouTube, whatever, as your training. You aren't actually writing that day, but you're learning something that's going to help you grow as a writer. Also, for me, a big one is just marinating my book ideas. Again, goes back to one of the NaNoWriMo videos I mentioned this year, but I rarely write things down before I'm about to write something. So for me, I stew on things. I think them over, I kind of think through things, and sometimes when I'm too tired to actually write anything, just sitting and thinking about my novel, I can accomplish. And sometimes then that's counterproductive because it keeps me up all night because I'm like, ooh, now, I'm thinking about this. But it can be beneficial because sometimes just thinking about it might actually give you that boost to sit down and write then. It's hard because no one is going to be the same. And I think what's going to lead me to is one of my final points is that, even though sometimes you can push through your mental fatigue and be productive in some way, you have to know your limits. That's bottom line. I don't think there's anyone who would watch this video and say, nope, you always have to push through. Because what happens when you push through when you're not able to? You are going to burn yourself out, and honestly, there's a good chance you might make yourself actually sick. And that could be physically unwell or mentally unwell. And no one wants that because that's not what we're here for. And with any job, if you get to a point where you're about to break down, that's a sign that you need the break. So sometimes if you're just at the end of the day and you're like, hey, I can't do it, in my opinion, it's okay just to let yourself not do it. That might be going back to the beginning of this video where I kind of said, what are you going to sacrifice? Your well-being is not something you can sacrifice ever for any job, for any commitments. You have to put yourself first. So if, one night you were supposed to, say like your schedule, you decided that you're going to try to write an hour on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The nice thing about creating a schedule for yourself is you can change it if you want to. You're in control of it. So say on a Monday night, you're just too burned out and you're done. Like you can't do it. There's a bunch of other days in the week to get that. Can you switch it up? What can you do? And if you just can't that week, it's okay. I think the best thing is don't beat yourself up on it. I know it's so hard because I think as writers, a lot of us are perfectionists. And it's so easy to get in that mentality that, if I'm not doing something, if I'm not writing, if I'm not creating, then I'm worthless or I'm nothing or I'm never going to make it. We have such a vicious cycle, especially in an industry that is constantly changing and so selective. It's so easy to get yourself down on something because, hey, if you can't even get something out in the world, you're already being rejected, right? That's a mentality that we shouldn't have, but it's so easy to. So I think, if you're taking anything from this video, you have to be easy on yourself. Maybe easier said than done, but it's important. And the other thing is too, with creators on YouTube, particularly on authortube, I do feel like there is a need to produce content. And not necessarily from the creators themselves, but from the viewers. Once you get on YouTube, you're opening yourself up to a ton of opinions. So first of all, it takes a ton of courage to even put yourself out there in a YouTube position. And second of all, it takes a lot to then continuously create content. But when you're on authortube in particular, there's a pressure to make content to eventually get published in some capacity. Because that's what your viewers are expecting of you. You're calling yourself an authortuber, so you should be an author. And that could be very detrimental too. It's hard because, again, you're kind of looking at a creator versus a viewer, and we're going to have different perspectives on things. And that's okay. It's just, you again have to be easy on yourself because you can get in your head that, I have to be writing, I have to be doing this because I have to XYZ. I have to impress someone. I have to show them that I can do it. I have to let my audience know that I'm successful. But at the end of the day, you are the only one that matters, and your well-being has to come first. So priority number one, man, yourself. So I think what I'm just kind of saying is that writing with a full-time job is going to take a little bit more effort, but you should never sacrifice what you need physically, mentally, and emotionally. Coming as a therapist who always preaches self-care can take many forms, and sometimes for people, writing is self-care. It is for me. I can look forward to writing and to unwinding and just crafting and creating. But it can also be detrimental because it can feel like a job. It can feel like I'm trying to force myself to do something. And it's those days where I feel like it's more of a task than it is rewarding. are the days where I really have to consider if it's worth me trying to push through, because I never want to hate something that I love so much. And with jobs, people do that all the time, that they, it's if they love it until it's no longer a job. And I don't necessarily believe that that's always the case, but it can be. And I understand why, because you you're all into something, and it's never going to give you the same in return, because that's what a job is. You love the job usually more than the job loves you. That's reality. That's, at least America, that's the reality I think most of us live in. But writing is only a job if it's actually your job. If you are in a position like me where I have no obligations with my writing, it's just, for me, I'm aware of my age and what I wanted to accomplish. And even though some of my expectations back when I was like 18, 19 were unrealistic, I finally became aware for myself that I want to get somewhere finally. I wasn't ready back then, but I am now. So I'm treating this a little bit more like a job, in the regards that I do need to flush out time, and I need to schedule, and I need to participate with people, and I need to edit by myself because I get too kind of crazy and chaotic when I'm talking to people. And that's where I'm at with everything. However, you might be different. You may be publishing currently, and you have to schedule time with all the craziness that's going on. More power to you, but hey, that's what you chose to do at the end of the day. And that's eventually what I would also like to choose at the end of the day, is I want to be able to have my full-time job and publish on top of it. And it's going to take some practice. So, none of us are perfect beings. And if anything that you're going to take away from this, just understand that it's okay if you're not performing to someone else's standard when you're writing, because no one's ever going to meet someone else's standard, but you have to look at yourself and say, what is my standard? And if you're meeting your standard, then at the end of the day, you're doing it. And that's all that matters. So I feel like I touched upon most of the topics that I wanted to touch upon in this video. And well, yes, I think some of it, there could be like a how-to or writing advice, but really it just comes down to how I feel. This is me. This is how things work for me. This is how I look at my own writing process. As someone who's not published, who has no agent, and has a full-time job, that's crazy and demanding. Being on call all the time is very stressful, and I do sometimes sacrifice writing because I mentally cannot put myself in a story when I'm too buzzed up about my own job. Everyone, I think, puts so much pressure on numbers and goals and achievements, when really, for your average Joe like me, who's just writing to hopefully get somewhere, who is actually putting the pressure on? It's us. So yeah, I hope that this was a beneficial discussion. I want to know, because this is a discussion video, did anything I say actually resonate with you guys? And do you agree with stuff? Or, even if you maybe somewhat agree or you don't agree at all, let me know what you guys think. If you have a full-time job, what are some tips or tricks that you can provide down in the comments for other people to take from and maybe incorporate in their own schedule? And just what are some things, that I didn't touch upon? Obviously, I'm talking as a person who currently has a non-traditional Monday through Friday job with on-call. So if you guys have different days, I would love to hear how you guys try to organize and schedule your own writing time. And what do you do if you don't do it? Do you guys beat yourself up? Because I know I used to do that in the past so often. Or have you learned how to roll with it and how to reschedule? So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap the video up here. For now, I think that's kind of where I have to leave it, because I don't know if I have anything else to offer. Like I said, this isn't really a how-to. It's more of how my mind works for writing with a full-time job, and it might not be the same for you. But if you guys let me know what you think down in the comments, I will be sure to keep this discussion going. And we'll leave it at that. So until next time, guys, I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you then. Bye.